The story centers around Yi Qinglong, a beautiful daughter of the Yi family. She is bound to marry Muan He, the youngest son of the Mu family, who is currently in a coma. The marriage has been arranged to bring prosperity to his health, as Qinglong will be serving as his talisman token bride. It's revealed that she's actually in love with the elder son, Muan Chong. However, due to some misunderstandings, they decided to end their relationship. An Chong is now married to our heroine's first cousin, Yi Pingping. This woman turns out to be arrogant, and she regards herself as the rightful heir of the Yi family. She also hates Qinglong with a passion because her husband, An Chong, still loves her. On the wedding day, Qinglong is pushed into the new house by the maid of the Mu mansion. She is then asked to serve An He, who is still in a coma. At this moment, our heroine realizes that he was the one who saved her when she was assaulted one evening. Her abuse was actually the reason why she didn't marry An Chong, because she thought she was no longer worthy of him. Just then, An Chong arrives and warns her that according to Mu tradition, if An He succumbs to his illness, she will be buried alive with him. To avoid such an unfortunate fate, he asks her to run away with him, but our heroine vehemently refuses because she's already accepted her fate. Suddenly, Ping Ping and the new mother-in-law arrive at the scene and see the two of them together. The jealous Ping Ping then creates a scene and demands that Qinglong be punished for trying to seduce her husband. As a result, our poor girl gets a harsh slap from her mother-in-law. In the following days, Qinglong starts looking after her comatose husband and discovers that someone is systematically poisoning him. Upon further investigation, she finds a small but substantial amount of toxic bark being boiled into a tea for him. This worries Qinglong, so she immediately shares her findings with her mother-in-law. She hopes they can help her husband and bring him back to normalcy. The cunning mother-in-law thinks about it for a while and then summons the physician who is currently looking after An He. Unfortunately, this physician blatantly lies and says that it was Qinglong who paid him to poison An He because she didn't want to marry a half-dead man. Our heroine is understandably shocked, but she's even more heartbroken when the mother-in-law believes his words. She tries her best to explain that she's innocent, but to no avail. Following the incident, mother-in-law, or Mother Mu, uses waterboarding to torture our helpless heroine, while Ping Ping and the others watch her with much satisfaction. In the next scene, Qinglong's sick father arrives at the scene and begs on his knees to stop the torture. He bravely says that he will face the consequences instead. An Chong also shows up and scolds Mother Mu, and due to this, she has to stop for the time being. Sadly, the torture is still not over for our helpless heroine. Later that afternoon, she finds herself in a dirty warehouse where she's forced to drink an abortion tonic while the evil women watch her. Qinglong warily says that she can't be pregnant, but then remembers the night she was assaulted. Thankfully, An He, who surprisingly seems to be back to normal health, suddenly appears in the warehouse and saves her from further humiliation. Later, Qinglong asks An He why he saved an untouchable woman like her. He disagrees with this statement and promises to look after her from now on. He also declares that he will treat the baby as his own flesh and blood. Meanwhile, a maid named Jixia, who is having a secret affair with An Chong, overhears their conversation. She then heads to his room and falsely claims that An He is the father of Qinglong's baby. It's then revealed that An Chong had his men drug Qinglong that unfortunate evening while she was out in the street. Since she had refused to marry him, he wanted to impregnate her and make her his concubine so that he could have claim to her wealth and fortune. He had devised the plan in such a way that he would appear to be the one who saved her from the assaulter. However, after Qinglong was drugged and abused that evening, she regained consciousness and escaped from the cell that she was kept in. An He then appeared in front of her, and he took her to safety. In the present, Jixia seems to be well aware of An Chong's sinister plans. He married Ping Ping and now wants to have Qinglong as his concubine to ensure that he gets all the fortune of the Yi family. But there is one slight problem. If Qinglong gives birth to her baby, her husband, An He, will automatically inherit the family fortune. This means he will have to stop her from giving birth at all costs. An Chong is worried by the situation, but he vows to take care of the problem. The next day, he approaches Qinglong and suddenly hugs her. He pretends to miss her and says he wants to be with her for eternity. Our heroine doesn't want anything to do with him and pushes him back. She also returns the Cartier bracelet that he had given her earlier. However, he hugs her again, and this is when Ping Ping shows up. The evil cousin loses her temper and hits Qinglong. As a result, our heroine falls and hurts her stomach, which sadly causes her to lose the baby. Later, An He becomes very upset when he finds out what happened. Qinglong consoles him by saying that perhaps it's for the best that the baby is gone, but she does start planning revenge against Ping Ping. Just when it's the right time to strike, Qinglong learns from the maid that Ping Ping has a lover to whom she has been secretly giving treasures from the Mu family. She reports this to Mother Mu with evidence, leaving her furious. Consequently, Ping Ping gets a taste of her own medicine as she's tortured in front of everyone. Later, An He discovers his brother and Jixia together talking about their cunning scheme. Armed with a gun, he interrupts them and warns that he'll reveal their plan. However, An Chong is unfazed by the threats and claims that his younger brother always gets favored by the family. He also shockingly reveals that he's actually an adopted son of the Mu family. Turns out, An Chong had once saved Father Mu's life, to which the Mu family adopted him as their eldest son. Therefore, he believes that he should be the one showered with wealth and fortune. Muan He abruptly changes the subject and says that King Long talked about having noticed a star-shaped scar on the back of her assaulter, which is very similar to the one An Chong has. This confirms that he is the actual abuser and the father of King Long's baby. Hearing all this, An Chong realizes that he inadvertently killed his own baby. Filled with rage, he almost beats up Jixia, as she had falsely told him that Muan He was the father, but he manages to keep his cool as he doesn't want any more problems. The scene then cuts to a worried King Long, who is anxiously looking for her husband. Turns out Muan He hasn't been home for days. Suddenly, a servant comes running in with a ransom note asking for 500,000 won for his safe return. Mother Mu wants to report it to the police, but King Long stops her, saying it would further anger the kidnappers. To save her husband, she readies the ransom money and brings it to an abandoned building as ordered by the kidnappers. But right after she hands over the money to one of the kidnappers, she notices that the whole building is on fire. Sadly, after the fire, the Mu family is handed over the charred remains of Muan He. Mother Mu blames King Long for what happened to her son and demands she be thrown out of the mansion. Unbeknownst to them, it's revealed that An Chong was the one who orchestrated the murder, and Jixia helped hide the evidence. Meanwhile, back in her room, King Long decides that it's time for her to leave the mansion once and for all. But before she can head out, she's ambushed by an intruder who turns out to be An Chong's associate. He has come to collect his fee for the murder of Muan He. Thankfully, our heroine manages to hold him back until An Chong arrives on the scene and beats him up. But when he notices that the intruder is actually one of his associates, he quickly shoves him out of the room. During this time, King Long notices the familiar star-shaped scar on An Chong's back. This finally makes her realize that he was the one who had assaulted her that evening. Our heroine is devastated by the revelation, but she decides to remain silent for now. Later, she approaches the intruder who is tied up in the warehouse. She warns him to tell the truth, or else she'll hand him over to the cops. The man is terrified by her threats, so he truthfully reveals that An Chong is behind all the deceitful plans. He was also the mastermind behind her kidnapping and the one who abused her. He further reveals that An Chong had always planned to make her his concubine and her cousin Ping Ping his first wife, so that he could get the entire fortune of the Ye family. Hearing all this, King Long is consumed with rage, and she promises to take revenge against An Chong. To initiate her plan, she agrees to be his concubine, but their first night is interrupted by Jixia, who also wants to be an official concubine. She tries to kill herself, as she desperately wants the same status. Jixia lies to An Chong that she's pregnant with his child. She fears that he will probably kill her baby as well. Just then, our heroine shows up at the scene. An Chong nervously says that he will send Jixia away, but King Long stops him from doing so. She claims that she will be gossiped about as a jealous concubine, and she doesn't want that. Instead, she advises making Jixia his second concubine, as she's already pregnant with his baby. An Chong is elated by the proposal, and he immediately agrees to it. The following day, King Long talks to her maid and learns a shocking truth. Turns out Ping Ping has been secretly administering An Chong with a tonic to lower his sperm count. This means it's virtually impossible for Jixia to be pregnant with his baby. Regardless, she goes to her cousin Ping Ping and informs her about the maid's pregnancy. The evil woman knows it is impossible, so she later approaches Jixia for a private talk. She asserts that the baby isn't An Chong's, as he doesn't have the sperm for it. Ping Ping then says that if Jixia wants to live with the Mu family, she has to work for her. That is, they have to plot together to oust their common enemy, King Long. After a lot of discussion, they come up with a sinister plan. Jixia will pretend to have a miscarriage, and they will blame King Long for giving her a toxic tonic. Soon after, this bitch pretends to faint and stages a miscarriage. An Chong arrives to check on her, but he's shocked to discover blood on her bed. King Long also shows up to examine Jixia, after which she sadly confirms that it's a miscarriage. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Ping Ping puts the blame on King Long, but the tables are turned when Jixia reveals that it was Ping Ping who gave her the toxic tonic. The latter is shocked and speechless as she realizes that the two women were working together. She's then reprimanded for her actions and locked up in a warehouse. The following day, King Long informs Ping Ping's father about her misdeeds. This enrages the old man, but he decides to rescue her for now. He offers to conduct a lucrative timber business deal between the Mu family and the Ye family, which would be very beneficial for An Chong. The latter is excited by the offer, and he promptly forgives Ping Ping for her deeds. As the days pass, King Long continues with her plan to torment An Chong. She tells her spy maid to spread rumors about An He's spirit haunting the mansion, and it just so happens that An Chong is being troubled by nightmares, so he believes the rumors. He then follows Ping Ping's advice and buys a peace charm. Meanwhile, Jixia starts having nightmares too, and she believes that An Chong has transferred his bad luck to her. Scared that she'll be punished, she decides to ward off the bad luck. She goes to a nearby pond and picks up a hidden pistol, which was used to kill Muan He. She then chants some words and throws the pistol in the water. Suddenly, King Long appears beside her, startling her to the core. Our heroine pretends to have dropped her hairpin in the water, so she asks Jixia to retrieve it. The latter reluctantly obliges and starts looking for it, but instead of finding the hairpin, she comes across the same pistol from earlier. King Long takes full advantage of this opportunity and reports the matter to Mother Mu. She believes that Muan He may have been shot with the same pistol. Unable to come up with an explanation, Jixia turns to Ong Chong for help. However, he ignores her and refuses to admit anything. The next day, King Long investigates Muan He's sealed room and surprisingly finds the ransom money she had paid for his safe return. She decides to expose Ong Chong as soon as possible, however she realizes she doesn't have enough evidence. In the meantime, the greedy Ong Chong focuses on gaining power within the Mu family. He meets with the elders, urging them to evict Mother Mu and support his reign instead. With Jixia's help, he then prepares poisoned soup for everyone in the mansion. Later, during dinner, Ong Chong manages to serve the poisoned soup to his entire family and the staff. But King Long, who is skilled in herbal medicine thanks to her father, immediately detects it. Therefore, she discreetly spits out the soup while everyone is busy. Once the poisoned soup begins to take effect on everyone, Ong Chong ties up Mother Mu and forces her to reveal the whereabouts of the keys to the family vault. The latter is shocked by his actions, as she always trusted him, but he simply laughs as she has hidden the keys in a very discreet location. In the meantime, King Long rescues the poisoned servants and purposely sets fire to Muan He's room. When Ong Chong learns of this, he rushes to save the box full of ransom money. When he arrives outside the room, he sees King Long, Mother Mu, and the others waiting for him. They see the box full of ransom money and confirm that Ong Chong is the one behind his brother's death. In the aftermath, Mother Mu calls the authorities to arrest him. Ong Chong pleads with everyone, claiming he's innocent, but to no avail. He's eventually sentenced to prison for all the crimes he's committed. With this, it appears the saga has finally come to an end and justice has been served. But out of nowhere, Mother Mu starts vomiting blood and faints. This is due to the amount of poison she consumed earlier. Before she takes her last breath, Mother Mu takes King Long's hand and apologizes for treating her cruelly. She then blesses her to manage the Mu family's affairs before finally passing away. The scene then cuts to 6 months later, where we see King Long looking over the family business. Even today, she's engrossed in conducting some important deals. But her respite is short-lived as Ong Chong suddenly arrives at the mansion. Turns out, he used his powerful connections to get released from prison. King Long is unwilling to let him go unpunished, so she seeks the help of a gangster named Jin Yi. She convinces him to partner with Ong Chong in his timber business and make him go bankrupt. At first, Jin refuses, saying it's dangerous, but when our heroine offers him a large sum of money, he agrees. When she leaves, the gang's second master, Tong Jifeng, appears, who happens to shockingly resemble Muan He. In the next scene, Ong Chong is informed of Tong Jifeng, the son of Shanghai's richest man. He learns that Mr. Tong is also looking for business partners in town. To seize the opportunity, Ong Chong sends him a greeting card expressing his interest in collaboration. He even invites Mr. Tong to stay at the Mu residence as long as they're business partners. The next day, he welcomes Mr. Tong to the mansion, but is startled to find that he looks exactly like his late brother. Despite the shock, Ong Chong composes himself and greets his guest, secretly contemplating whether Mr. Tong is really his dead brother. He admits to himself that if he could kill Muan He once, he would do it again. Meanwhile, Jixia and the others are equally surprised by the new guy's appearance. Later that evening, Ong Chong organizes a family dinner in order to confirm Mr. Tong's identity. However, when the rich guy consumes a lot of alcohol without discomfort, the family members realize he's not Muan He. This is because Muan He was allergic to alcohol. Mr. Tong then makes himself comfortable in the Mu mansion and decides to stay there until he can establish this new venture. The next day, Ong Chong discovers that the timber he was supposed to deliver to Mr. Jin is all moldy. Turns out King Long is behind this, as she wants to sabotage his deal. Since Ong Chong is not the sharpest tool in the shed, he doesn't know what to do, so after a lot of thinking, he approaches Mr. Tong for help. The latter is a little hesitant at first, as he doesn't want to meddle in others' affairs. He eventually helps him through a friend who provides him with a fresh batch of timber. However, the deal is sealed at a high price, requiring full payment up front. To fund the wood purchase, Ong Chong sells some of the Mu family's shops and gathers the required funds. King Long, on behalf of her husband, then takes the money and approaches Mr. Jin. However, she urges him not to accept the replaced timber. Following her advice, Mr. Jin refuses to accept Ong Chong's timber and also demands additional compensation. He cites that the quality of the timber doesn't match the ones he was shown in the first place. Pressured by his threats, Ong Chong reluctantly uses the ransom money to resolve the issue. After this, he collaborates with Mr. Tong in a gold mine venture and expects substantial earnings. One night, as King Long is examining the account books from the Mu family, Jixia brings some soup for her. Our heroine doesn't trust her at all, so she refuses to drink it. But just a few moments later, she realizes that she's been drugged. She didn't drink the soup, but still, she somehow feels uneasy. She then recalls Jixia waving a handkerchief towards her while serving the soup. This means that the handkerchief was drugged, not the soup. Fortunately, before anything serious can happen, Mr. Tong hears her screams and rushes to the room. Being a scholar of modern science, he examines her and learns that she's been affected by an aphrodisiac. All this while, King Long continues calling him by On He's name. This makes the rich guy realize that she still has feelings for her ex-husband. Suddenly, they hear someone approaching, so he quickly leaves through the window. Our heroine then takes a pill given to her by Mr. Tong and starts vomiting to get the drug out of her system. Soon, On Chong arrives at the scene and learns about the situation. He angrily confronts Jixia and has her locked up in the woodshed. After all, he has to pretend to be nice around King Long to secure her family's wealth. Later, our heroine expresses gratitude to Mr. Tong for saving her life. She says she would have died if it had not been for his immediate intervention. At this moment, the rich guy reiterates his promise to protect her and finally reveals his true identity. He turns out to be none other than On He himself, who we thought was killed by his brother long ago. Turns out he was saved by a master named Tong after he was shot by On Chong. After that, Master Tong took him to Shanghai and adopted him until he was ready to return to the Mu Mansion and take revenge on his evil brother. King Long can't contain her happiness as she sees On He in the flesh and blood. The couple then finally acknowledge their feelings for each other and promise to destroy On Chong once and for all. In the meantime, Ping Ping plots to oust Jixia from the mansion so that she can be closer to On Chong and his wealth. For this, she orders her men to place Jixia's cousin in her bed and catch them in a compromising position. The plan surprisingly works and On Chong is furious to see them so close. Suspecting that they're having an incestuous affair, he locks them both in the woodshed. Jixia only realizes a few hours later that it was Ping Ping who deceived her. She then convinces her cousin to untie her, to which he obliges. However, she refuses to free him as he had betrayed her in the past. The cousin then starts screaming for help, prompting Jixia to stuff some clothes in his mouth. As a result, he's unable to breathe and falls unconscious on the ground. When she finally realizes that he's not breathing, it's too late as her cousin's already dead. Terrified, Jixia anxiously retrieves her hidden belongings and attempts to escape from the Mu Mansion. However, On Chong bursts into the room and tries to strangle her. He isn't going to let her escape because she knows too much about his heinous crime. Just when it seems he's about to kill her, On He and King Long arrive and knock him out. They save Jixia and initiate their final plan. In the next scene, On Chong finds himself imprisoned in the woodshed. He wakes up beside the deceased cousin, scaring the life out of him. When King Long and the others question him about the murder, he becomes increasingly anxious. Therefore, to deflect suspicion, he blames Jixia for the murder and accuses her of stealing the money before fleeing. Our beloved couple pretends to believe his lies and decides to let him go for now. Later, an enraged On Chong decides to track down Jixia and kill her for her treachery. He seeks help from Mr. Jin, hoping to use his influence to track her down. However, the latter decides to play a cruel trick on him instead. He spikes his drink and cunningly leads him to his sister's bed. The following morning, Mr. Jin finds him in a compromising situation with his sister. On Chong doesn't even know how he ended up there, but he is still beaten and threatened with a knife. But before the situation can escalate any further, On He and King Long pretend to intervene and save him. As per the plan, Mr. Jin agrees to let On Chong go, but he has a condition. The quote-unquote playboy must now take his sister as the third concubine. On Chong is in no condition to have a fourth woman in his life, but to avoid any conflicts, he reluctantly agreed. Once back in the safety of the Mu Mansion, On Chong decides to secure the gold mining rights to expand his business. But sadly, he doesn't have the finances to do so. Mr. Jin's sister, his third concubine, then cleverly suggests he take a high-interest loan from her brother. She even suggests mortgaging the Mu and Yi family assets and properties. Left with no other option, On Chong desperately follows her advice. Several days later, he accidentally encounters the goon who had been ordered to kidnap King Long in the beginning of the show. He then learns that she was aware of him being the attacker and that she's been pretending to be friendly around him all along, when in fact, she was the one who sent him to prison. Consumed by anger, he kidnaps our poor heroine and intends to seek revenge. He plans to subject her to further sexual abuse. But just as he's about to carry out this heinous act, On He arrives at the scene. King Long quickly retreats to his side and shields herself from the cruel man. On He then comes up with a plan to get rid of his evil brother for good. He proposes that On Chong divorce King Long in return for complete control of the mining business. On Chong, who is hungry for power, eagerly agrees to the offer. Now, with the mining business to himself, he announces the news to his executives in the next scene. However, just when the celebration is beginning, On He arrives at the scene to reveal his true identity and expose his evil brother's crime. On Chong is shocked to the core when he realizes that On He has somehow returned from the dead and is working together with King Long and even Mr. Jin. Just then, the police arrive with Jixia, who provides substantial evidence to his heinous deed. To make matters worse for him, he learns that the mine was illegally obtained, leading to legal consequences for him as he is now the sole owner. He also has enormous debts to Mr. Jin. Facing a dire fate, On Chong attempts to stab King Long, but a cop fires a shot at him, killing him on the spot. In the aftermath of this incident, On He finally confesses his love to King Long, and she too reciprocates his feelings. Our hero then proposes to her where they first met, marking the end of the show.